Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Indie Music Podcast. Wow, episode 5.
Can't believe we made it this far.
Can you believe it? We got this far. I'm very proud, to be honest.
We are back with another episode with an artist interview and live music performance. As always, thanks so much for tuning in.
As well as listening to this on Spotify, Apple Music, whether you're listening to this on, we're recording it on video, as always. We'll give you all a little wave. So it's gone up on patreon.com/alexrainbirdMusic if you want to watch us all there and support us at the same time. Okay, so today is a very special episode. It's with one of our all-time favourite singer-songwriters. Not only has he been a huge part of Alex Rainbird Music over the last few years, he's also so kind, down to earth, and listen, absolutely lovely. Pleasure to work with every time. Please welcome Paul Johnson, also known as Canyon City.
Hey,
Paul, how you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well, thanks.
Of course.
It's so great to be on the 5th episode, getting in early on the podcast.
It's a special episode, definitely
Absolutely.
special. For everyone who's listening, I mean, I guarantee a lot of people already kind of know who you are, have listened to your music. Could you just introduce yourself, give a brief summary of who you are, where you're from, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I make music under the name Canyon City. Paul Johnson is just too boring of a name to use, for an artist name. But I've been doing this for about, with under the pseudonym since about 2015. Alex Rainbird Music, both Alex and Beth, of course, have been incredibly kind and generous to the music, really welcoming me into the Alex Rainbird community early on, and we've been friends and partners in the music community for a long time. So I very much appreciate that. But I would say the music definitely sits within that indie folk corner of the world, although I'm always terrible at finding ways to describe my own music. But and it's largely stuff that I do in rooms like this. I started it in a studio apartment in Nashville way back when, and then have just kind of taken it with me wherever I've been since then.
So awesome.
Perfect. So let's start at the very beginning, I guess. When did you first get into music, and how old were you when you thought this could be like a career for me?
Yeah, well, it sort of came in waves. I started playing music when I was about 7 or 8 is when I started picking up the guitar. My parents are both musicians, never professionally, but that's kind of how they met in college. They were in a little bit of a folk trio, and they would just do like local gigs. Awesome. Yeah, and so I was really lucky as a kid because that kind of music was around, and it was just kind of part of the soundtrack of a family. And so when I was a little kid, they really wanted, I have one sister, they really wanted my sister and I to pick an instrument. And I really, really wanted to play guitar. A lot of people told me to play piano first, which in hindsight makes sense. I'm still very much a novice on the piano, but I'm honored all the time when I'm producing because I'm doing like MIDI stuff and things like that. But I just couldn't stay away from the guitar. And my dad initially taught me my first few chords. And then we found a really good teacher. It's just a family friend. That carried me through most of my youth. And as I became like middle school and high school age, started playing in some garage bands and things of that sort. And I think it was around when I was 14 or 15 is when I first started to dabble in writing. But it was really songwriting that became the addiction for me. That's when I really got bit by the bug and felt like this is something that I really want to invest time and life in, and if there's a way that I can do this with as much time as possible, then that's of course what I want to do. But there's a quote that says sometimes it takes a long time to learn how to play like yourself, or something along those lines. And that was very much true. Like it took a while to find my voice as a songwriter. As I think it took me a while to just figure out who I am as a person, as I'm still figuring out I'll be a 90-year-old man still figuring that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love that. I really love that you obviously got it from your parents. They did the same genre. That's really, really cool.
I was going to say, you can tell when you listen to your music that you spent that time figuring out who you want to be and figuring out your voice, because it's so distinctive. Like in seconds if it's a Canyon City song, just by like the way you write and perform and like do it all.
Yeah.
Oh, that means a lot.
Yeah, of course. And I was just gonna say we've followed your previous projects before Canyon City, and we've always wondered what made you start Canyon City, because it's just like such an incredible like project, isn't it? Like even watching you grow has been like so incredible. And we had just a lot of questions on how Canyon City kind of like came to be and like why that name, because it's a very, very cool name as well. So yeah, could you just tell us a little bit, like, did it come naturally to you to just start it, or like, you know, how did it kind of become Canyon City?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it came from a season where I actually feel like the season just before Canyon City, I had sort of musically lost my way a little bit, or maybe just went a little off trail, in that I was working for a little while as a session musician, playing for some other artists. Stuff I would usually be in the context of, like, I would be the acoustic guy or a guitar player of certain sorts. And there's a producer in Nashville that I mean, I was always writing songs, just if nothing else for myself, not really knowing where or how they would come out in the world, if ever. And he was very kind to be like, well, you always have these songs. Why don't we just do, you know, something that with your music? And so that was way before Canyon City. That was with actually a project called Silver Trees. That was sort of a collaboration between this producer and myself. But that was kind of the re-entry back into being the artist. Up until then, I was sort of in the background of other people's projects. And it was also a re-entry into using my voice again. Singing didn't come naturally to me. And so it's,
You'd never know.
No, you didn't know.
I'm hyper self-critical with it too. I still, you know, I'm always listening back, like, oh, I could have done this different or this way. I really wanted to expand the Silver Trees thing into a communal thing. I wanted to bring my friends along, really turn it almost into a band. And the people who I was going to do that with all ended up, they're still some of my best friends, but they all ended up kind of moving away at the same time.
Oh, no.
And,
That's so sad.
Yeah. I was sort of in a state of limbo of, you know, well, I don't know if I'll continue that project without them. But I was talking to a friend about this, and he ran a small label in Nashville that primarily did sync-minded stuff. So for those who might be listening, sync is basically just an industry term for when music gets used in TV shows or commercials or movies and things like that. They would try to find a song that serves that need. And the proposal that he basically put to me when I was in this state of limbo was, well, why don't you do some work with us? And this is where I feel like I kind of lost my musical way a bit, because I knew that project was going to be a means to an end. You know, we're like, well, this will just sort of be the thing that gets me out of my part-time job. The issue with it is it was the first and only time in my professional career that I've really made music for anything other than my heart's expression. So like we would be making music to fit this industry need.
It's not quite as genuine as you wanted to express, sort of thing.
Exactly. And I really underestimated how taxing that would be on my heart and soul. And I really didn't want to have that relationship to music, because it was such a deep and long time love of mine that I really want to restore it being a joyful and a heartfelt and expressive place. In the midst of that transition, I started to get a little bit of home recording equipment, started playing around with recording myself. And that's kind of when I started working on the early material that would eventually be released as Canyon City. And the function of Canyon City music for me in that time was that I needed to have some outlet where music was just authentic, it was heartfelt, it was expressive. I wasn't really sure how this would be received by the world, if it would ever make it out into the world, but I really needed to restore music as a joyful and a meaningful place in my life. And the name itself came from a couple different places. One being that Canyon City was sort of like a hidden cove, like a hidden city that was where I could just hide away and not have to worry about industry pressures, not have to worry about fears of like, well, how's this going to take care of me? And more of a attitude of how can I take care of this, or how can I just first and foremost do this for the joy and the expressiveness of it. And then the other side is the contrast and also the marriage of nature and man-made too, of this, this organic depth and also the human touch to it. My biggest issue in production is usually like I try to overdo it because I get self-conscious. I'm like, oh, I should really make the sound big. And then I kind of forget, like, oh no, it's like,
it's supposed to be like natural. Yeah.
There's beauty in the simplicity. So a lot of times I spend a lot of time deleting tracks and, and simplifying. And ironically, or maybe not so ironically, I think that the listeners could hear the difference. And though Canyon City was the project that I made with sort of throwing caution to the wind and being like, well, maybe this is just for me. Maybe nobody will care about this. I think that they could hear the sincerity, and so that ironically became a thing that resonated more than my previous projects. And fortunately, something I've been able to do full time for a while now. But the world's always changing, so who knows?
So amazing and so great to like hear the story behind
That's
it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we can end the podcast there if you want. That's can't get much better than that.
That's all we need.
Yeah. I never thought about it being like the canyon, like the natural, and then the city as like more like. That's really cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, I've definitely learned something new.
That means a lot. Thank you and I mean, you've both always been so supportive and kind to anything that I've done under Canyon City, and I really appreciate the momentum, and I really see that as being a big part of the collaboration of the music at this point, being that a lot of the music that I make for Canyon City is done in sort of bouncing ideas back and forth between just me playing around with different instruments in a room.
Yeah.
I see the point of collaboration for the project being when this gets put into the context of the listener community, what new life does it take, and what new purposes do the listeners give it? And that ends up affecting the way that I hear it and the way that I see it. And I think it kind of ends up informing, like I almost feel like I have the listeners in the room with me when I'm writing sometimes, because we sort of experience this together, and it kind of gets recreated in that sense. And so all said, I very much appreciate the listener community, and especially yours, especially the Alex RainbirdMusic community. And I kind of see them as collaborators in my mind, because the music gets given a new context and a new life when it's invited into people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just an absolute pleasure always, isn't it, having you on the channel, and you've become like just part of Alex RainbirdMusic now, haven't you? Like just part of the family. You're part of the furniture, There is no Alex RainbirdMusic without a Canyon City on there.
Yeah. And a lot of people were so excited that you were going to be doing a podcast today. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people listening. So that's so cool.
Well, I'm so happy I'm happy to be in the community, and just honored to be in the family.
We first featured your music. We look back on our video history in May 2017 with your song "Paper Airplanes," which is such a good song, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
feels like such a long time ago.
Over 4 years ago now, which is crazy. How was life for you back sort of spring 2017? What sort of state of mind and what sort of place were you in back then?
Yeah, so I think spring of 2017 was just after the first full length that I did for Canyon City, which was Midnight Waves. And I had, through just a series of strange events, gotten in the ears of some Spotify folks who had started supporting that a little bit. And then also there was the organic listenership too. And those were kind of playing off of each other and creating a little bit of an audience to the music. And so Paper Airplanes was sort of the single following the album. And when I listen back to it, I guess I feel a mix of emotions. I mean, ultimately, I'm very proud of the song. But Midnight Waves being the first thing that I had released that really started to get some audience, like how audacious of me to release a song that was very separate from Midnight Waves. I have like respect for old me and being like, hey, like way to way to just like plow forward and keep creating, like find, try to like keep searching for the walls of what this is and what you can do and things like that. It's also convicting to current me, because I sometimes feel like, hey, like, why am I so afraid sometimes? Why, to try this texture or that corner of the room. And so I think it was in that time, there was the excitement of being like, oh, wow, like this is, some people care about this. And then also continuing to experiment and continue to explore what the Canyon City music, what it is and what it can be. And it was a fun time. It was very experimental and very
new, I guess, back then.
So back to the albums and Midnight Waves and things like that. So you've released 3 so far over the last 5 years, plus so many loads and loads of amazing singles and EPs. Do you have like a different process or mindset when making an album? Or, like, do you set out to do that, or is it just whatever feels right for you at a time? Do you have any sort of like process for that?
Yeah, like I'll have something I want to do. I'll be like, I really want to have, this album or this EP. I really want to sort of play around with these new ideas that I've been having. I think my biggest philosophy with songwriting in general is to exercise inspiration. And by that, I mean like finding ways to not just wanting to get the song done, but really feeling in the song emotionally, getting it to the point where it sort of steers itself and I can get out of the way of it and just be like, oh, wow, like you just do your own thing. I'll be here to tune the strings. And what's tricky about that is it doesn't always look like work. And so sometimes exercising inspiration for me is like going for a walk or going for a hike, or having a conversation with a good friend that I haven't seen for a while. And just anything that kind of revives the soul a bit. And then other times I am just scared of failing. And so in the times when I'm scared of failing, that's when, just get in the room, sit down, work through that fear. That's when that comes in. But process is something I think about a lot because it's something that I inevitably come back to. If I'm unhappy with how a crop of songs is turning out, usually the root of it is in, well, have I been exercising inspiration lately, or have I been holding my nose to the grindstone, just trying to churn these things out? And those never work when I do that. And so the process is always evolving, especially since life has changed so much since the inception of this project. Where I live has changed. I got married since the beginning of it. And so, how that looks, how exercising inspiration looks, today is different than what it was back then, but the concept is still the same of like, be on the hunt for those things that really kind of like make the heart jump. And then once the heart is jumping, go into the writing room or go into the studio. Usually when I sit down in the writing room, I don't actually know what I'm about to write about. Sometimes I don't even know what the song is about until like the second verse. And so like I'll just be playing, and then certain things will come out, and then at that point I'll think, okay, what are you trying to say? Like what are you trying to tell me in this? And then the work of like refining it or catching, here's what's coming out will happen. And so the end goal is always to have something that's cohesive, that's not too cryptic to get into. I want the songs to be accessible, but what's fun about that is that I oftentimes learn things about myself that that were kind of living in the subconscious or just outside of what I really cerebrally understood. And it's sort of an exploration process that can be really startling sometimes, like, oh, I didn't know I felt that way. But like, now that I see this, I do, or I didn't see to think of it that way. But, since this gibberish turned into this lyric, it's almost like co-writing with, something other in the room.
Yeah.
And,
sounds like therapy almost, just like sort of talking to your subconscious about and figuring yourself out. Yeah. So cool.
Absolutely. It's very much that way. And, what's interesting is sometimes that will expand into the entirety of an album, which is very much the case with an album that we're kind of releasing in parts throughout this year, but we'll be releasing in its entirety kind of towards wintertime. Is the whole album ended up having themes to it. It's probably the closest I've ever been to writing a concept album. But it was totally unplanned. Like it was just, as I look back at all the songs, I was like, wow, they're all circling certain themes and images, and in ways that really feel outside of myself. Process is something that's both mysterious. It's frustrating too, because it's the only way that I've found to advance it is by letting go of the control of the results, and that can be very frustrating because I mean, all this talk about uncertainty and exploration and stuff like that might make it sound like I'm a very wandering soul. But like I crave certainty all the time, in sometimes extreme and unhealthy ways. And so like it's very much an uncomfortable place to work in all the time. I think especially for me, but but it's the only way I found that works. And so I've got to do it.
Got to keep going.
Yeah.
Well, it's quite clearly working because you currently have over 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify. You have over 100 million Spotify streams in total, which is incredible and like just blows our minds so much. Like I can't think of a better
so
person
people,
for it to happen to, because you deserve it so much. You deserve all that support. But can you believe that many people have found your music and reached your music and connect with your music? I was just thinking, sometimes do you wake up and just think, wow, there's 1 million people listening to me on Spotify. How does that feel?
Wow. Well, I mean, that actually brings up congratulations are in order to you for your 1 million subscribers. So that's something that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We
Absolutely.
can't believe it either.
Yeah, we can't believe it.
It's it's funny because when the music was in sort of this positive feedback loop of people were discovering it, then sharing it, and then the music platforms were picking up on that and doing the same. That was really, I think that was probably the most surreal time. I was like, oh wow, people care. It was also surreal because I was extra insecure having done most of this project from, in my view, a very just sort of give it a try, but not a whole lot of professional. I wasn't.
And
in
you
a
did it kind of on your own as well, so it was a bit more pressure.
Sort of thing.
And I felt very kind of insecure about that. I was like, oh man, when my engineer friends hear this, they're going to have things to say and comments on the mix. And so there was it was excitement. It was also surprise. These days it's something I'm so grateful for, to have the community there. It's sometimes hard to remember. Maybe it's not hard to remember, but I sometimes fail to remember, which is my own failing. That these are human beings, that these are, that's a human, those are 1 million lives that you get to sort of,
we're the same.
We can relate definitely.
Yeah. And that you're whispering in the ear of all these people in all these different situations, going through 1 million different things, living out 1 million different stories, seeing the world in 1 million different ways. And what an honor that is to be able to be a part of all those stories.
It's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely mad.
People and the internet and the world is just so amazing. It's just so crazy. You can reach people just from a room, and
people just love you. So it's quite clear that you're doing it right. You're just being yourself. Yeah, and that's the best thing about it. You haven't
when
changed.
People love you
kind of
for
thing.
That, then it's the best thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's well, but all said, I mean, you know that experience better than anybody, in that you have this incredible community that you built, and I mean, I see that as being such a cool thing that you actually have this interactive community of people that are just it's a way to bring the best parts of what music is as an art form, which is just listening together, remembering what common humanity feels like, and you found a way to do this in a way that connects people, and as people are finding the music and experiencing the music, they're also able to comment and talk to each other, and I think that what you built is so cool, but it's also such a wild thing that is possible these days.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's just mad. We can't believe it, can we?
Well, like how you said you started Canyon City, you're just doing it for yourself. And when I started it, I was literally just doing it as a place for my favourite songs to go, just a little corner where I can just find it all. And to have people now find that, and then we got to think, if we
connect with it.
Yeah, and then we can present it in a playlist, and it makes it easier for people to discover artists like yourself who they may not have found otherwise. It's just
And now we're doing a podcast talking to Canyon City, who's our friend now. Do you know what I mean? It's just really weird. It's weird how it all connects.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's I have a love-hate relationship with the internet, but this is the part of it that I love.
Yes.
Is that,
we're the same.
So you mentioned about moving around. Obviously, you started Canyon City in Nashville, and you've moved around quite a lot over the years. We noticed you've lived in New York, and you're currently in Colorado, if I'm right. What's been your favourite place, and what have each of the places you've lived in brought to Canyon City in different ways?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think, fortunately, so far, my favorite one is the current one. I've really really love being in Colorado. It's also been, to reference back to the emphasis on exercising inspiration, it's been a really conducive environment for that because I can go outside so accessibly here. I can go, after this, I'm going to, probably go to a lake and kayak a bit.
So jealous. So
Can't believe it's bringing that up.
We've seen photos and it just looks absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it looks so lovely, yeah.
But it's been really, really restorative for that. And I think that makes its way into the music too. I'm able to feel, when I do sit down in the writing room, I'm able to, the phrase I was about to use is let my hair down, but I don't have much hair left to let down. But I'm able to relax a bit more and really get into that open headspace for writing. But the other places have also been, at the very least, part of the self-exploration. So Nashville was a really great place to cut my teeth. It's you're obviously surrounded by so many artists and creatives, and really so many intimidating artists and creatives, because you're looking around and so many people are doing that on a high and professional level that it's really easy to look inward and be like, oh, what do I have to bring to this? What can I do that hasn't already been done better than what I know how to do it? That was a really great training ground. It was sort of a good place to be, sort of baby Canyon City in
I can imagine it was a really good place to be at.
It was and then moving from there. So I in Nashville, I have so much gratitude for my time there, but I kind of felt like personally I was at a place where I could really easily blink and be 10 years down the road and not be too different. And
right.
So I when I left Nashville, it was really because I was so comfortable there that I felt like I needed to get some degree of introduced discomfort into my daily.
Yeah, that's definitely that's awesome.
And that was where New York played a part, which was
I was going to say, like, that is
different.
A bit different.
And it was, so I was getting ready for that transition kind of towards the end of 2018, and closing the Nashville chapter, and really, I mean, New York was just sort of another experiment of like, well, let's see what happens when I go into a completely different context. And I was really, I'm a pretty isolated, introverted person when left to my own devices. And so I also like the idea of being in an environment where you have sort of forced interaction with lots of different people. You're like uncomfortably close to everybody on the subway and things like that.
Yeah, you just got to go on the subway.
And so I was curious about how that would affect life, how that would affect my creative process. And also just curious to see, like, is there ways that I could challenge myself, not just as an artist, but also as a human, to see if I could continue to grow. And that's what the hope for New York was. When, by the time that it was time to actually move to New York, I had met my now wife, and we were figuring out, how to combine two different lives together, which usually takes a little bit of trial and error in that process. And so in doing that, the place that I had in New York was like it would have worked for me, but like to make it a recording studio, a living space,
it's not for two people.
Yeah, and for anybody that's lived in New York, that finding space is the biggest
small,
thing.
yeah.
Exactly. And so we were trying to find ways to make that work, and then we were also both really feeling, because both Brooke and I feel this really deep connection and need to be in natural spaces. We really get revived in those spaces. So I think that as fun as New York was always to play in, to visit, we started to feel sort of the hunger for like, man, we really want the outdoors to be not just available, but like daily. And which was a learning process. Sometimes you kind of have to take something away to really find out what it means to you. And so in that process, we went out looking for somewhere that would meet that shared need of like, we really want the outdoors to be a regular part of our process. We also want there to be enough space to be super creative, to have the recording studio, but still have that community element. So for a little while, we tried a place in Tennessee, which was close to both her family and also close to kind of my chosen family in Nashville, or the foothills of the Smoky Mountains in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And
Cool.
that was a great experience. But where we were still kind of like a 40-ish minute drive to any trailhead.
Okay.
And so it was still a little bit disconnected. And also it was sort of a strange experience for me to be so close to Nashville without being in Nashville. It was like my brain was like, oh yeah, like we're back in Nashville, but everybody was still on the other side of the, of the foothills and stuff. And
you're back in Nashville, but you're not.
You're close, but you're far. Yeah.
You're nearly there.
And then we were also on the verge of building the recording studio in that space. And before we did that, we wanted to make sure, is this before we put all this work into building the studio, is this where we want to be long term? We went to a few other places just to make sure that we were putting roots down where we really wanted to put roots down. And one of the places we visited that were just, it was kind of in the back of our minds of like, well, where have you always sort of been curious about, was in Colorado. And so we did a little trip out here. We Airbnb'd in a few different towns, and we both really fell in love to the point where we were like, oh man, like if we have the opportunity to be out here, we really don't want to miss that. And so the road to Colorado was a little bit bumpy because the pandemic happened just after that. And which was interesting because we had made the decision that we were going to move to Colorado. And so we sold our house, or we put it up for sale. And while that was put up for sale, we were staying in a little cabin in northern Minnesota that my family had. But we were just kind of in that transition zone. We're like, well, once the house sells, then we'll move down to Colorado.
Yeah.
The pandemic happened right after we had gotten up there. And so we got stuck in kind of this limbo phase. And for a while that was tough, but it actually ended up being sort of a pause that helped us really be intentional about, what do we want to, and this kind of goes back to like combining two lives. Like, what do you need out of life? What do I need out of life? And it was a moment for us to really ask those questions. And since we've been down here, it's been super restorative to be close to the outdoor spaces. And that's definitely influenced the music. And so all those shifts, all those life changes, some of them were seasons of growth. Some of them were seasons of learning, of just like clarifying, well, what works for our life, and then also what works for the music. And, a continuation of figuring out kind of that process of practicing inspiration, like where can we most bring that practice into reality. And so far Colorado's been the most that, but also Nashville's a close second because there was such a great community there. And it was also just such a formative learning experience out there.
Do you think you'll stay there for the time being? Or
I hope so. We're sick of moving.
I can imagine, yeah. And it'd be nice to experience it.
Yeah,
not
we
in
do
a pandemic.
keep like forgetting where you are. We're like, is he in Colorado?
Is he still there?
Yeah, all my friends have gotten in the habit of every year, if they have something to send me, being like, so we're like, what's your new address? Like they don't even they don't even have to know that I had moved. They just assume.
Yeah, you've actually visited Europe and the UK quite a few times. And in 2019, you came to our London show, which thank you again for being a part of that, because it was just such an incredible experience, an incredible night. And you've played a lot of live shows, like just around different countries and stuff. So how was the pandemic for you? Because obviously live shows, they're only really becoming a thing again. I'm not sure what it's like in America, but over here, it's not really a thing. And you were actually going to come to London this summer, but you can't come. So how has the pandemic been for you, and how has it affected you? Because it must have just been awful not to play live or see anyone, I guess.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the show that we got to do together. That was such a blast. I really appreciate you having me on for that, and that was such a highlight. And also, I'm so glad that we were able to do that. When I think about how close that was to when everything else would change,
right? I know, yeah.
Like we always think about that.
How do we get away with that?
If it had been like a few months later, we never would have done it.
No,
it's crazy, isn't it?
If we would have known,
we got so lucky.
Yeah, definitely. But to be able to have squeezed that experience in was really, really special, and so I was super grateful to be a part of that, and that was just such a blast.
It's amazing.
The pandemic's definitely been, I want to be cautious in the way I speak of it, because, I've been relatively privileged in my experience of being able to kind of hunker down I know that a lot of people have not had that same opportunity and experienced real hardship in that. And so I think we've all gone through some very hard times as a result of this, but I also want to, contextualize. I've still been, pretty privileged within what I've considered to be hardship of it, but live music is definitely something that both as a fan and as an artist, I really have felt a longing and a loss for, because it's that element of music, especially in those listening room environments where you really feel the presence and the energy and the connectivity to the listening community, where it really goes from kind of like we were talking about before, it goes from numbers on a Spotify page to like human beings that are in front of you, and you can see the emotional reaction. You're having an emotional reaction internally too, and it's just such a special manifestation of that connection between listener and artist, and that feeling of togetherness and presence is something that I really crave. Definitely as an artist, also as a fan, being able to go to shows and things like that.
Yeah, same.
It's also like the live streams. I think the label's been a little bit frustrated at me because I haven't live streamed a whole lot throughout the pandemic. But the live streams, when done well, can be really fun. Like I really loved getting to be part of the celebration with your million subscriber, because it was so interactive. It was fun to get to like talk with people in the chat and also see the other artists there, and it really had this community vibe to it, and I love that.
Yeah.
There's been other times where like I'll go onto Instagram Live, which can still be a really fun experience, but I sometimes it sometimes just makes me crave like the live environment all the more.
Oh, it makes it worse.
To have like the taste for it, and then be like, oh, like I just want I want to jump through the screen. And,
you want to be performing now.
Yeah. And so it's been, I've definitely felt like I've been on a live music diet for a little too long, and I'm starting to feel the effects of it. But, I have faith that it'll come back when it's safe. And, I think there's a lot of hunger on all sides for it. I think that the fans are excited for it. I feel really terrible that we unfortunately had to kind of postpone our summer hopes for a show out there. But as soon as it's safe, we're definitely excited to be there with the community as soon as possible. And I know we've chatted a bit about this in the last couple of weeks, but it's really surprised me how much those little interactions matter in just like daily life. Something I hope to bear in mind going forward with everything. Felt this way with some of the interactions, like being able to see an old friend that I haven't seen for a long time, things like that. There's a deep, deep gratitude for like, oh my gosh, I don't think I will ever take this for granted again. Like I hope that carrying that clarity forward into the live shows going forward, and just like those interactions going forward, just this really deep sense of like, this is so irreplaceable. This is so special. You never know when something like this is just going to go away. And
definitely.
And so I definitely feel like I have a renewed. I was always grateful for those experiences, but I think I have a renewed sense of like just how special those are, how fleeting they can be, and to really take the full presence into it.
Really makes you grateful for just like even the smallest things in life.
Oh yeah,
that's
absolutely.
What the pandemic's
you
done.
never think like live shows won't be a thing for like 18 months plus.
Or not being able to see your family for like half a year.
It seems like a given, and then you like realise it's not at all.
When it gets taken away, that's when you appreciate it more.
But I mean, unfortunately, it's been our reality all along. Anything can happen to anyone, and we all hope that things go well, everybody's healthy and safe, and every day is kind of all we have. And so not to be like not to bring the mood down too much.
No, it's important. It's important.
The highs and the lows.
All the highs and lows of it. Since we've spoken about, it's obviously been a tough time, like with the pandemic, for live shows. Whereas in 2020, you did release quite a few singles, including my favourite, Catch Fire. Love that one. Incredible.
You always talk about it.
So I was just wondering, like, how was it to release, and what motivated you to keep releasing when we're all locked down and it was a tough time?
Yeah, it was a conversation that I was definitely having with people and with myself too. I had at least written those songs right in that transition period of when we were going from East Tennessee to Colorado, making those plans. The recording happened largely on the front end of the pandemic. And then the releasing of it, of course, happened throughout the pandemic and throughout most of 2020. There was some feeling sometimes where I'd have to sit back and be like, is this right? Is this appropriate to do right now? Because there's so much going on right now. Sometimes it felt kind of wrong to be like, check out my new single, in the midst of like, oh, like it's just, it just felt so not the most important thing in the room at the moment. And so what people would message me and post from time to time was usually this experience of like, man, like these songs really gave me just like a breath from the loneliness, from the isolation, from just the overwhelming feelings of the pandemic. But I hope that it was just sort of like 3.5 minutes of calm.
Yeah, it was.
It definitely was, yeah.
It was just, I mean, even for us, like just to hear something like new and fresh.
Yeah. We're locked down, like we can't go outside, but at least Cannon City's got a new song we can listen to and just like
that's what it's like.
Take that step outside of our own minds for a second and like, definitely.
Yeah, well,
it definitely did that.
Well, I'm very, very happy to hear that. 'Cause that was the hope, is that it would be kind of like opening a window for a moment and just kind of
that's exactly what it was, yeah.
That's what it felt like, yeah.
Yeah, so on to your new single, Paris, which you'll be performing live later in the episode. Thank you in advance. We're so excited. Oh, yeah. Obviously, it's about the city of Paris.
We think.
I'm guessing it is, yeah. Do you want to speak more about that song in particular and how that sort of came to be?
That song came about in sort of a wistful moment, thinking back to, actually that was some of the memories I was drawing from was directly tied to the show that we did together. And Brooke and I had, before we came into London to do that show, we just done a quick little
You went to Paris.
trip.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
Yeah.
And neither of us had been, and so we were like, well, if we're in the neighborhood, so to speak.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. And so some of the memories and lyrics within that are the nostalgia and the whimsy of looking back at these things, but it's also in a greater sense about taking those moments of magic and bringing them into the everyday. Because Paris is such an overwhelming place, and from a standpoint of like beauty and or at least it is to me.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And also that trip was just really lovely. It was really wonderful. The greater theme of the song is finding these magic moments and finding a way to sort of carry them with you and infuse them into the everyday life. And like one of the themes of the record in general, one of the themes of the songs that are coming out is memory through the distortions of time, and how there's sort of this rose-colored filter that nostalgia tends to put onto things.
Yeah.
And then also trying to acknowledge and work with that sensation of like how memory works and how it changes, and how just seeing life through sort of this filtered and aging film that replays in our heads, and how to relate to that. And yeah, so it's a lot there, but I'm clearly not super refined at articulating it quite yet, but it's kind of all those things wrapped up in one.
It's so cool to like hear the background of it.
Song.
I thought you just went to Paris, had a pan of chocolat, loved
Saw
it.
the Eiffel Tower and made a song. Yeah, I was also going to say like about the memory and stuff, because I said to you the other day, like we might be stressed right now or something's bothering us, but we'll look back on this in like 6 months, a year, whatever, and just remember the good bits and remember like you just got to appreciate things.
Yeah,
that's one thing that my dad has tried to remind me of with little success. Is he's like, I look back on my life and if I have any regret, it's just that I just worried the entire time, and like.
Yeah, you can relate.
Yeah, I certainly can too. Like I look back and there's almost at this point I have sort of a sadness when I think about it, because there were truly beautiful seasons of life that I look back and think like, oh, wasn't that great? Wasn't that such a cool experience? And then I get a little more sober minded with it. I'm like, in that moment, I remember I was like overwhelmed with worry about this thing that ended up being nothing, or ended up being sort of a passing storm of sorts. And like so much of my life has been that. Like I think that I've actually lived maybe 2% of my life. The other 98% has been something that I've sort of taken a picture of as I, worry about something else. And so it's that's definitely a thing to, in the interest of living the rest of my life, I want to, I want to tackle that if I can.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of people go through that, don't they?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Every time you release a new single, like Paris or like any of your songs, really, we always find a new favourite. It's
Paris is my new favourite.
They all got to go out very quickly. Every single one is beautiful, and you basically just never let us down. So how do you do it every time? And also to add to that, do you personally have a highlight of Canyon City so far, and like a personal favourite song?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I mean, it means so much to hear that you're enjoying the new stuff. That's always one of my fears when I'm putting out new stuff is you're always, at least I always sometimes compare my current self to my old self. And, you of course want to be on an upward trajectory as far as like quality and growth goes. And so I'm always kind of interrogating that about myself. Yeah. I mean, as far as the favorite song goes, I tend to gravitate towards the simpler things. And so like I'll usually in a set of songs, my favorite will usually be the most stripped back or the most acoustic ones. And I'm not sure if it's sort of a chicken and the egg situation of which comes first. I'm not sure if, because I do so much of the production work, it's because those songs are still the freshest in my mind because they required the least amount of replaying and things like that. And so they still kind of feel like the newest to me. Yeah. It also could be that the reason why I put the least amount of production on them is because they're my favorites and because I want them to, be heard. I want every little piece of them to have a chance to see some sunlight. Or I believe in the song to the point where I'm like, this could maybe survive as in its simplest form. And so I think that as I look back on the catalog, it's usually like the acoustic track that I like the most. And so like Anyway is one that I really enjoy playing. Mm-hmm. That also just means a lot to me personally. Of the Circling the Sun EP, Ferris Wheels was the one that resonated to me most, that I still really enjoy. I mean, I enjoy playing all these songs, but those are the ones where, when I get a chance to play it, sometimes I'm like, I forgot how that felt, but it was like a nice experience to come back to it. With the new set of songs, there's one that's sort of, it's down the road a little while, but there's an acoustic one within the new set of songs that'll be released in the coming months. That's called Castle, that I really enjoy. Right now is kind of one of my favorites out of the bunch. But it's also really nice to be able stuff like this where I can talk to you about the music and what it means and things like that. It's sort of, it's like free therapy to me in that I can,
you're welcome.
And I can kind of examine these things and we sort of put them out in the air and look at it from a few different angles. And so, it's sort of a feedback loop in that sense of, create these things and then we kind of look at it and go like, what was that about? And then as we kind of understand that further, as I start to have the opportunity to talk about it, then that starts to affect the way I see myself in the songs. And then that goes into the growth process that creates the next batch. And so it's sort of an ever evolving, and that also plays to what I was speaking of about sort of collaboration too, of how the actual act of sharing the music is sort of, to me, feels collaborative in the creation of it, because it's an opportunity to see it from a variety of perspectives and then take what I learned from that into the next thing.
We had a lot of excited fans today when we told them that you were coming on the podcast. I think you were, up there with the main person that everyone wanted on the podcast. So thanks for joining us. But we had quite a lot of questions actually. So I thought we'd just
Awesome.
go into that a bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So to start, 3 separate people requested your presence in their countries. We had someone from Utah, someone from Croatia, and also a request for you to play at a wedding in Chile. Are any of those places in your diary, or have you visited any of them places before?
I mean, the only place out of those that I've been to is Utah.
Yeah.
But I would love to go to all 3 as soon as possible. Every time I get the opportunity to play somewhere new. It expands my perspective of life and also just understanding, how this music interacts with people in a variety of different places and stories. And so all three of those, although I don't have, touring's kind of on pause for now, all three of those in the grand scheme of shows in life, I would absolutely love to be there.
Yeah, send him a DM and maybe he'll be at a wedding.
Incredible.
Paul's going to get booked up now.
Yeah.
So we had a shot of Alyssa who asked, where is your favourite place to write music?
I think it changes depending on life season. What I get to do here is have a writing room specifically for writing, which has been really nice because I kind of leave my computer in a different place, and it keeps some of those temptations to check email and
you can
stuff.
Ignore all that.
Just isolate yourself. Yeah.
And so I love any space where I can kind of be a hermit a little bit and go into sort of an isolated spot and open the windows, hopefully see some greenery, see some trees or something.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I just kind of sit there in silence for a while, or I'll just play and just try to catch a vibe or catch a wave. Anywhere where I can do that is really great. And so the main elements of it are usually a place that's sort of set apart where I can just kind of be alone for a while. I can also a place where I can try out different melodies that might be a little bit embarrassing if someone heard it, but will be like out of earshot of everybody. And I'm just able to just kind of meditate on stuff and breathe some fresh air and think. And yeah, so anywhere where I can do that is always a place that I seek out.
This is quite an abstract one, but Betty D. Goots, I think I'm saying that right, asked, what kind of daydreams do you have?
What kind of daydreams? Ooh, I think a lot about my next hike or walk or camping trip. I think about like the open spaces a lot. When I can catch a daydream that, where it's either related to like, playing a show or sharing the music or being in a beautiful place or something like that, or traveling to a new and exciting spot. Those I really love to hang on to as long as I can. I also spend a lot of time in my head just like wondering if I left the stove on or something like that. So
we all do that, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. So it's a battle in the mind to stay in the good places, but where I can just kind of zen out and zone out, those mean a lot to me.
So we had gons.r.z. I bet we're saying a lot of these names wrong. What is the biggest challenge of writing your own songs?
The biggest challenge is knowing when to stay and when to refresh. And so, like sometimes what the song needs is for me to just make that second cup of coffee and
take a break.
And come back with a fresh set of ears. Other times what it needs is for me to hang out and really say, like, I know this next line is playing hide and seek, but I'm going to find it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the timing is challenging, like knowing when you're hurting more than helping by trying to search really hard, and also knowing when that's what's needed, when like the inspiration is right on the edge of your fingertips and it just wants to see that you care enough to commit to it and before it comes out. And so I think that's been a really tricky thing, is finding that balance of when to stay and when to leave, and also when to let stuff go. I let a lot of songs go, because I'm always trying to stay as inspired as I can, and sometimes I'll let something go that I'll come back to later on and be like, why didn't I? Why didn't I give more to that?
Yeah.
And then other times I'll be like, this next one's my hit. And then I'll get caught in sort of a mindset of try to make it be that. And then I'll be like, I'm just going to try something else for a while. And then the song that's sort of the anti-hit, the acoustic song of the album, ends up coming out and being my favorite one of all of them. And so it's I think like, as I say all this, what comes to my mind is just like self-management, know, like knowing how to balance that tightrope of staying inspired and staying diligent, and knowing which one is going to serve the song the best in that moment.
But I'm going to say this right. But to Tim, someone asked, where is your dream place for a concert?
Wow, dream place. It's changed. When I lived in Nashville, it was the Ryman Auditorium, because that's where all that's where all my heroes go to play. Now in Colorado, it's Red Rocks, because that's where all the heroes come to play.
It's our dream to like see a show there. So
Cannon City in Red Rocks is
that was so cool.
Yeah, that's our dream.
I think Red Rocks would be the most fitting place if I was ever given the opportunity to play there too, because it's it feels like an environment that matches the sound.
Yeah.
But I also always I find that wherever I live, I sort of mythologize. I don't know if that's a word, but if it isn't, I just made it up. I whatever like the big kid venue of kind of my hometown is, because there's also this desire to feel belonging where you are too, and so I kind of want to reach the most special place in the area. But I've never been there. I only know it from concert documentary or like concert movies that I've watched growing up. But what looks really cool in the UK is the Royal Albert Hall.
Yes. Actually, I performed there.
Well,
really?
You didn't.
Yeah.
You always
not on my own, but I was in choir in school and we performed there. It's really cool.
Oh, that absolutely counts. That's great.
Yeah, it does kind of count.
But I've always and I think that also comes back to like being. It looks like just a cool venue, and then also it's in one of my favorite places. Being in London, I just love that city, and then also being in the concert tapings that I've watched growing up. There's also that. Like, I want to be like that when I grow up, kind of feeling that I have.
The Queen,
it will happen.
The Queen's hanging out there. You might see her, might spot her. Yeah.
It will happen. I can feel it.
Maybe I'll just like, I'll try to like go in the loading door and sing a couple lines a cappella and add to my
then
resume.
run away.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. We had, finally, so our last question. G Herring 199 asked, do you find it difficult to be so open with your lyrics, particularly in the song OK, where the message is so strong?
Well, I appreciate the question. It's fortunately the listeners, as is, with that question, have been so kind to the times when I have been open and been vulnerable. It's always been received very, very, with a lot of compassion, and I think that makes it easier and to put those songs out there. It's also something that I increasingly, and I think this is a phenomenon that we've all experienced to some degree, of just feeling kind of alone in our experience, feeling like surely there's people that maybe feel something kind of like this, but surely I'm the only one that feels this, or that. Or that struggles with this or whatever it is, and so I think that one of the great opportunities that we have as artists, and also just as like people in the world today, with all the ways that we can talk to each other and put things out there, is to share some of the things where it's like, hey, like if this is where if this is something you're going through. Same, and you're not alone in that. And then also some of it is reaching out from a personal place too, and being like, am I the only one going through? Is there anyone out there that wants to make me feel some company in the feeling? And so I think some of it is reaching out, asking for company, and then also hopefully it's offering that company too, in some of those feelings and some of those emotions.
Definitely.
And then I also just want to destigmatize to the best extent that I can, whatever small influence I have in the world and things like that. I want to normalize being able to talk about things like mental health and something I've had a lot of trouble with throughout adulthood, throughout childhood, like just anxiety, OCD, all that stuff. Like it's a fight, but it's one that I want us to be able to talk about these things as the normal things that they are, because I think that one of the big lies of the world that I would like to sort of diffuse is this idea that we're all kind of alone in our experience. We're all alone in our, which is not the case. We're all, of course, every person is unique in the way that they've gone through the world, but a lot of these things are a part of being human, and there's ways that we can help each other heal just by keeping each other company in the experience and by holding hands. And I try to not come to the situation with a whole lot of answers, because I don't really have a whole lot of answers, and I don't feel like I'm qualified to be a person that's like, here's what we should do about this. But what I hope to bring to the situation is just sort of like, hey, if you're feeling this, so do I. And maybe we can just sort of keep each other company in that experience. Just talking about these things like help. Just acknowledging it exists, and that people are
it's okay not to be okay.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, like, I know, for my like, sometimes I look out at the world and I think, gosh, the people that do the things that I want to do are just like, they're just saner than I am, or they're just, or they just have it more together than I am. And whenever I learned that, like, oh no, like, they're actually, they're dealing with the same stuff that I am, or like they have their own mental health struggles or ways that they've been able to deal with this, just that normalization of it, like, feels like, okay, well, maybe I can reach for that, or maybe but I guess my hope is just to, I crave the company in the hard feelings. I hope that when I put sad songs or songs that are vulnerable out there, I hope that it also gives that to other people. And it's certainly a two-way road. I get a lot out of it when people share their stories, and it also, every time those things are said, it takes a little bit of the sting out of it, and it also, I think, opens a little bit of space for us to have more peaceful relationships with those things.
That's all our questions from the community, but we just wanted to ask you, what's next for the future? Where does Canyon City go now? You've mentioned a little bit about your album, I guess, but if there was anything else, like, that you wanted to add in.
Yeah, well, I'm always. I'm really excited to explore this new writing space and this new studio space, because with every move, with every change of environment, there's a little bit of an opportunity to kind of refresh my approach to the writing process and to the production process. And there's always interesting things that come out with that. And so I'm working on a new set of songs that. It might just be for myself. I don't know. It might. I don't know if it has any kind of commercial viability, but it's like a little EP of lullabies that I don't know if it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be anything that I end up releasing. But I've just.
Well, if you want an extra pair of ears, we'll take it on.
And as you say, it's these songs that you don't think will do well are the ones that do the most.
Well.
So
But I've been having fun with that. It's been fun to think of music from that perspective and some of the stories in that, and then I'm also just trying to continue to find ways to get out of the way of the music and find places that make me feel alive and open and growing. And so I'm also definitely looking forward to, as soon as it's safe, to come back to shows and things like that. But of course, we're all waiting with bated breath for that moment.
Is there anything else you wanted to add before we go today to the podcast?
Oh, I mean, just gratitude for everybody that's been listening, everybody that asked a question, and just the people that let me hang out in their earbuds for a few minutes. It means a lot to me, and I can definitely it keeps me company in all these things and all these experiences and all these feelings. And so I just really appreciate anybody that spends some time in the music. And I also really appreciate what you both do with creating this community and in sharing the music as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much.
It's such a pleasure to...
Such a pleasure. We just love you. You know that.
The feelings are mutual.
Yeah. Oh. So as promised, this is a live performance of Canyon City's latest single, Paris. It's already become one of our favourites, and we're sure it's going to be one of yours too. We hope you enjoy.
I wish I could open up my window, step into a world of long lost time. Change the scene like flipping through the channels of our lives. Little things are never quite so simple once you look up close and see the lines. Sometimes I think someday was so long ago, time rolls by. I miss the LA's of midnight, shadows and narrow roads in the street light. Honey, you're there forever in closed eyes, holding tight, holding bright, holding tight. You and I, time and time on me of Paris, Paris, time and time on me of Paris, Paris, time and time on me. How I can live inside my head and hide it. I can fit my days into my dreams, but if I risk my wings, wish I'll find you in brand new green. Free. Still I miss the LA's of midnight, shadows and narrow roads in the street light. Honey, you're there forever in closed eyes, holding tight, holding bright, holding high. You and I, time and time on me of Paris, Paris, 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 holding high. You and I, holding high. You and I, time and time on me of Paris, Paris, time and time on me of Paris, Paris, time and time on me of Paris, Paris, time and time on me of Paris, Paris.
Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. Where's the best place for people to find you after listening to the podcast and connect with you and your music?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I would love for anybody to connect on really any of the socials, also on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever your favorite place is. I should be lingering in the corners of those places, and so please feel free to connect in whichever way most makes sense with your day.
Thank you for listening, everyone, and watching on Patreon. We'll all wave.
I love it.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. Also, make sure you're following us on Discord and Instagram, since it's where we announce our next guests and you kind of get all exclusives on there.
So another episode of an independent artist and a performance will be coming in a few weeks' time. But for now, thank you again for listening.
And thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and just for it's so good to get to see you both and catch up a little bit and just talk about life.
Yeah, definitely. We can't wait to see you soon, like actually in person.
ASAP.
Same.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye, guys. Bye.